I'm Ophelia, 32 and 6 years of 80-hour weeks at my law firm. Finally landed me the career-making merger of Crawford Industries. Then my VP, Amanda, swooped in and stole everything. My name vanished from presentations, my insights became her brilliance, and soon the 7-figure bonus would follow. Until I found it. Paragraph 342.6, the legal loophole she never bothered reading. Let me show you how one overlooked clause changed everything. If you're watching this, drop your location in the comments, hit subscribe, and stick around to see corporate karma in action. After graduating from Columbia Law with honors, I entered the world of corporate law with big dreams and bigger student loans. My parents, both public school teachers in Minnesota, had sacrificed everything for my education. Their pride when I landed a position at Winters & Thompson, one of New York's most prestigious law firms, made all those sleepless nights worth it. I started as most associates do, buried under mountains of paperwork, conducting due diligence that more senior attorneys would use in their arguments. But I had a talent for finding subtle contractual vulnerabilities that others missed. By year 3, partners were specifically requesting me for their teams. Our firm specialized in mergers and acquisitions, representing companies during the complex process of combining with or purchasing other businesses. The atmosphere was intensely competitive, but also exhilarating. Each successful deal meant bonuses, recognition, and steps toward the Holy Grail partnership. My direct supervisor when I joined was Amanda Bailey, the firm's youngest vice president at 38. At first, she seemed like the mentor I'd always wanted. Amanda had cracked the glass ceiling with apparent ease. Her office, with its corner view of Manhattan, displayed photos of her shaking hands with Fortune 500 CEOs. I admired her sharp suits, her confidence, and her seemingly effortless command of any room. "You remind me of myself," she told me, during my first performance review, smiling as she approved my bonus. Hungry, detail-oriented, willing to sacrifice for success. We developed what I thought was a strong professional relationship. She'd invite me to client dinners, introduce me to important contacts, and occasionally offer career advice over drinks after particularly grueling work weeks. Robert Parker, a senior partner nearing retirement, also took interest in my career. Unlike Amanda's polished, almost calculated demeanor, Robert was old-school, blunt but fair. The law is about details, he'd remind me, but justice is about people. While Amanda taught me how to play the corporate game, Robert quietly ensured I never lost sight of legal ethics. My closest ally at the firm was Jessica Winters, the granddaughter of one of the founding partners who had started the same year I did. Despite her family connections, Jessica worked twice as hard as everyone else, determined to prove herself on merit alone. We bonded during a particularly brutal all-nighter preparing for a hostile takeover defense. "Family name got me in the door," she confided, "but it's also a weight. Everyone's waiting for me to fail." The managing partner, Michael Thompson, remained a distant figure during my early years. Silver-haired and intimidating, he communicated mainly through his assistant, sending brief emails of either approval or cutting criticism. Everything changed when Crawford Industries announced its intention to merge with Lexington Partners, a $50 billion deal that would reshape the technology manufacturing sector. The news rippled through our firm like an electric current. A deal of this magnitude would mean enormous fees, prestige, and career advancement for whoever handled it successfully. During our Monday morning meeting, Michael made the announcement that shook my career path. "Crawford has specifically requested our firm for the merger," he said, scanning the conference room. "Based on their previous satisfaction with the Jefferson acquisition team, I'm assigning Ophelia as lead counsel on this project." The room fell silent. Being named lead counsel on such a significant merger at my level was almost unheard of. I felt the weight of 24 stares, some congratulatory, others envious. Amanda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Excellent choice. Ophelia will work directly under my supervision, of course." What followed were months of the most intense work of my career. I practically lived at the office, developing the merger strategy, conducting due diligence on both companies, and drafting preliminary agreements. My apartment gathered dust while I reviewed thousands of pages of financial statements, identifying potential regulatory hurdles and structural solutions. The merger was particularly complex because of antitrust concerns and international regulatory requirements. I assembled a small team including Jessica, and we worked through weekends and holidays. I missed my brother's wedding, sending an expensive gift with an apology that felt hollow even to me. At first, Amanda maintained a respectful distance, receiving my regular updates with approving nods. Keep up the good work, she'd say before heading to industry lunches or partner meetings. But as the profile of the merger grew with financial news outlets speculating about its market impact, I noticed a shift. Amanda began attending meetings she'd previously skipped. She requested to be copied on all correspondence. She started scheduling private calls with the Crawford executives. Just building relationship capital, she explained when I inquired. The personal touch matters at this level. I thought nothing of it until the day everything began to change. 3 months into the merger preparation, Crawford's CEO Edward Franklin requested a progress meeting at their headquarters. I spent 2 days preparing a comprehensive presentation outlining our strategy and progress, rehearsing until each slide transition felt seamless. The morning of the presentation, Amanda stopped by my office. "I'll take the lead today," she said casually, as if discussing lunch plans. "The executives will expect to hear from VP level." "Of course," I replied, assuming she meant the introductions and high-level overview. "I've prepared detailed slides on the regulatory strategy and timeline." "I've reviewed your materials and made some adjustments," she interrupted, handing me a USB drive. "We'll use this version instead." When I opened the presentation during our prep session, I discovered she had completely overhauled it. My detailed analysis remained, but the language had shifted subtly. Our strategy had become my approach. The team's findings was now my assessment. During the meeting with Crawford's executive team, my confusion turned to disbelief as Amanda introduced herself as the lead counsel on your merger, relegating me to my supporting associate with a casual wave in my direction. For 2 hours, I watched as Amanda presented my work as her own. Each time I attempted to contribute, she smoothly interjected, as I was explaining to Edward last week, or building on what I just covered. Ophelia will now walk us through the appendix details. The Crawford team seemed impressed, directing their questions to Amanda, who occasionally turned to me with Ophelia. "Would you pull up the supporting documentation for what I've outlined?" The ride back to the office was silent. I stared out the taxi window at the passing New York streets, trying to process what had happened. Perhaps there had been a misunderstanding about roles. Maybe this was standard protocol I wasn't yet familiar with. That evening, I knocked on Amanda's open office door. "Do you have a minute to discuss today's meeting?" I asked. "Close the door," she replied without looking up from her computer. When I sat down, she finally met my eyes. "You did well today." "Thank you, but I was confused about the presentation changes. I thought I was leading the regulatory strategy portion since I've been developing it." Amanda's expression hardened slightly. "Ophelia, you're an associate. Crawford Industries is a $50 billion client. They expect to work with senior leadership. I understand, but you've done good background work," she continued. "But this merger requires a delicate touch. Experience, relationship management, skills that come with time." Her tone was patronizing, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "The assignment came to me as lead counsel," I said, feeling my face flush. Amanda leaned forward. "Let me be clear. Michael assigned the firm to this merger. I decide how we deploy our resources. Your contribution is valued, but don't confuse background work with leadership." She glanced at her watch. "I have a call with Michael in 5. Is there anything else?" I left her office feeling as though the floor had dropped from beneath me. The merger I'd poured months of my life into was being systematically taken from me, and I had no idea how to respond. The next day, I sought out Jessica in the firm library. Amanda's completely taking over the Crawford merger, I whispered once we were alone among the legal volumes. She presented all my work as her own yesterday. Jessica's expression was sympathetic but unsurprised. She did the same thing to Diana on the Westbrook deal last year. Diana from tax. What happened? Diana complained to Michael. 2 weeks later, she was staffed on pro bono cases until she left for another firm. Jessica glanced around before continuing. Amanda has Michael's ear. They go way back, started at the firm the same year. So I'm just supposed to let her take credit for everything. My voice rose before I caught myself. Document everything Jessica advised. Keep original drafts with timestamps. Save emails. Build your case quietly. She squeezed my arm. This happens all the time, Ophelia. It's awful, but it's how the game is played at this level. Over the following weeks, Amanda's takeover became more blatant. In team meetings, she referred to my merger strategy and assigned me tasks like I was a first-year associate. She began scheduling client calls during times I had existing commitments, then informing me afterward about decisions we've made. My name disappeared from correspondence. Draft documents I had created were circulated with Amanda listed as the author. The team I had assembled began reporting directly to her. Each night I returned to my apartment later, sleeping less and worrying more. I started having stress headaches and skipping meals. Friends stopped inviting me to events, knowing I'd cancel at the last minute for work. My parents called less frequently, tired of hearing the strain in my voice. The merger that was supposed to be my big break was becoming my breaking point. After a particularly difficult week, I decided to speak with Michael directly. I requested a meeting through his assistant, who skeptically informed me he had 15 minutes between calls on Thursday. When Thursday arrived, I sat outside Michael's office, clutching a folder of evidence, original drafts, emails, meeting notes, all proving my leadership on the merger before Amanda's intervention. He's on a call with Tokyo, his assistant informed me after I'd waited 40 minutes. He asked if this could wait until next week. As I turned to leave, defeated Amanda emerged from Michael's office. "Oh, Ophelia," she said with false warmth. "Were you waiting to see Michael? He and I were just discussing the Crawford merger progress. I gave him your latest reports. He's very pleased with how I'm managing everything." That evening, during a team dinner celebrating a regulatory hurdle clearance, Amanda raised her glass. "To successful teamwork. This merger will be career-defining for all of us." Later, as the dinner was winding down, she cornered me by the coat check. "You've seemed distracted lately, Ophelia. I hope you're not letting personal feelings interfere with your work quality." "My work quality has never been the issue," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. Her smile tightened. "Good. Because I'd hate for the partners to question your commitment just as bonus determinations are approaching." She patted my shoulder. "Between us, I've recommended you for a modest increase. Not the merger bonus, of course, that will reflect senior leadership contributions, but something to acknowledge your support role." As she walked away, her parting words landed like a slap. "Don't look so disappointed. Did you really think any part of the merger success would be attributed to an associate?" As weeks turned into months, the Crawford-Lexington merger progressed toward its final stages. What should have been the crowning achievement of my early career had become a daily exercise in humiliation and frustration. Amanda had systematically positioned herself as the architect of the entire merger. While I continued drafting the complex legal documents, conducting the due diligence, and solving the regulatory challenges, she presented herself as the mastermind behind every strategy. My role became increasingly marginalized. In meetings, Amanda would interrupt me with, "What Ophelia is trying to explain is," before rephrasing my exact points as if they were her own insights. If I made a suggestion, she would dismiss it only to propose the same idea days later to client applause. The isolation grew worse. Colleagues who had once sought my advice now directed their questions to Amanda. Junior associates who had previously reported to me now received their assignments from her. Even Jessica, though sympathetic in private, kept her distance in public settings, wary of being associated with someone clearly out of favor with leadership. One Tuesday morning, Amanda called me into her office. On her desk sat a stack of documents. I recognized immediately the antitrust compliance strategy I had spent the entire weekend perfecting. "I need you to reorganize these before the partner meeting this afternoon," she said, not looking up from her computer. "The format doesn't work." "What specifically needs changing?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. I followed the standard format for regulatory submissions. "It's not partner-ready," she replied vaguely. "Restructure it completely. And I need it by 11. I spent 3 frantic hours reformatting the 100-page document, skipping a doctor's appointment I'd scheduled weeks ago. At 11 sharp, I delivered the revised version to her office. At 2 o'clock, I slipped into the back row of the conference room for the partner meeting. Amanda stood at the front distributing copies of my document now with her name on the cover page. "As you'll see in my analysis," she began, "I've taken an innovative approach to the antitrust concerns." For 45 minutes, she presented my work verbatim, accepting compliments from Michael and other partners on her thoroughness and creative solutions. Not once did she acknowledge my contribution. As the meeting concluded, Robert Parker, my mentor, caught my eye across the room with a concerned glance. He had been away on extended leave handling a personal matter and had only recently returned. This was likely his first exposure to Amanda's credit theft. That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of injustice pressed on my chest like a physical thing. I called my mother, something I rarely did with work problems. "She's taking everything, Mom," I said, finally letting tears fall. "Months of my life, my ideas, my future at this firm, and there's nothing I can do." "There's always something you can do, sweetheart," my mother replied. "Sometimes the answer isn't obvious yet." But the next morning brought no clarity. Only a calendar invitation for a meeting with Crawford's CEO and CFO. The subject: final merger structure discussion. I wasn't invited. When I confronted Amanda about my exclusion, her response was cutting. "Edward specifically requested a senior-level meeting," she said. "Besides, we'll be discussing compensation structures for executive retention. It's not really your area." Executive compensation had been precisely my focus for the past 3 weeks. I had created detailed models for how to retain key personnel without triggering golden parachute tax penalties. After she left for the meeting, I retreated to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall until I could breathe normally again. When I returned to my desk, an email from Amanda awaited me. "Need complete revision of sections 15 to 22 by tomorrow morning. Crawford leadership has concerns about the current approach. Fix it." I stayed until 3 in the morning rewriting sections that I knew were legally sound, making arbitrary changes to satisfy Amanda's vague criticism. When I finally crawled into bed, my alarm was set to ring in 3 hours. The physical toll became impossible to ignore. I lost 15 pounds. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes. A persistent cough developed that wouldn't respond to medication. My doctor suggested it was stress-related and recommended a leave of absence advice that seemed laughable given my situation. Jessica noticed during our rare lunch together. "You need to take care of yourself, Ophelia. No job is worth this." "If I step back now, I lose everything," I replied. 6 years at this firm down the drain. "You might not have a choice," she said gently. "Look at yourself." The final straw came during preparation for the pre-closing financial review. Amanda scheduled a meeting with the entire team except me. When I asked why, she claimed it was an oversight and invited me to join. As I entered the conference room, conversations hushed. Amanda was standing at the whiteboard outlining what appeared to be a bonus distribution structure. She quickly erased it when she saw me. "We'll continue this discussion later," she told the team. "Let's focus on the regulatory timeline now." After the meeting, I gathered my courage and asked Amanda directly about the bonus allocations for the merger team. Her laugh was cold. "Ophelia, surely you understand how this works. The Crawford merger will generate over $30 million in fees for the firm. The partner and VP bonuses reflect our leadership. Associates receive their standard year-end compensation. But I've been doing partner-level work on this deal since day one, I protested. Amanda's expression hardened. Let me be absolutely clear. Not a cent from the merger will be yours. You're an associate doing the job you're paid to do. The sooner you accept that, the easier your career will be. That night, I seriously considered quitting. I drafted a resignation letter, imagining the relief of walking away from the toxic environment. But then I thought about my student loans, my apartment lease, and the brutal job market for mid-level associates without partner support. The next morning, I found Robert in the firm's coffee room, away from prying ears. "Do you have a moment to talk?" I asked, voice low. He nodded, leading me to his office and closing the door. For the next 30 minutes, I detailed everything: the stolen credit, the marginalization, the threats about compensation. Robert listened without interrupting, his expression growing more troubled. When I finished, he sighed deeply. This isn't the first time I've heard something like this about Amanda. Can you help me? Should I go to Michael? Robert shook his head. Michael and Amanda have a complicated history. He's unlikely to take your side, without irrefutable evidence. So there's nothing I can do. I didn't say that. He leaned forward. The law is about details. Ophelia, have you thoroughly reviewed all the merger documents? Every page, every clause, most of them. There are thousands of pages. Start with the implementation sections, he suggested. Look for anything unusual about who has authorization to execute specific aspects of the merger. Amanda may control the narrative now, but the documents themselves might tell a different story. I left his office with a renewed sense of purpose. That night, instead of drafting my resignation, I began a methodical review of the entire merger documentation, starting with the sections Robert had suggested. The Crawford-Lexington merger had entered its final phase. Next week's board presentation would be the last major milestone before signing, and Amanda had made it clear that this would be her moment of triumph. I arrived at the office at 6 that morning to prepare, having barely slept after reviewing merger documents until 2 a.m. The conference room was already set up, place cards indicating seating arrangements for the Crawford board members, Lexington executives, and our firm's representatives. My name card was placed at the far end of the table, barely visible from the main presentation area. When the meeting began, Michael opened with firm pleasantries before turning the floor over to Amanda. She stood confidently, clicking to the first slide of what I recognized as my presentation, now completely rebranded. Over the past 9 months, she began, I've led our team through one of the most complex mergers in recent corporate history. For the next 2 hours, I watched as Amanda presented my strategic approach, my regulatory solutions, and my financial models, as if they had sprung fully formed from her mind alone. Occasionally, she would gesture vaguely to our associate team who had assisted with the paperwork. The Crawford board members nodded appreciatively. Edward Franklin, their CEO, specifically praised Amanda's innovative approach to the international tax structure, a solution I had developed after 3 sleepless nights researching obscure tax treaties. Near the end of the presentation, Amanda displayed a timeline for merger implementation. I will personally oversee every aspect of the integration, she declared. My intimate knowledge of every detail of this merger makes me uniquely qualified to ensure a seamless transition. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Board members approached to shake her hand. Michael clapped her on the back loud enough for everyone to hear. This is why you're on the partnership track, Amanda. I slipped out of the room, unable to watch the celebration of my stolen work. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection, pale, exhausted, defeated. For the first time in my career, I seriously considered walking away from the law altogether. As I splashed water on my face, the bathroom door swung open. Amanda entered, her expression triumphant until she saw me. Excellent meeting, she said, briskly opening her purse to retrieve her lipstick. I said nothing, gathering my things to leave. One piece of advice, Ophelia, she called as I reached the door. This is how the game is played. The sooner you accept that, the farther you'll go. Or don't, and stay an associate forever. I turned to face her. You stole 9 months of my life. Work that I did. Ideas that I created. Her laugh was dismissive. Prove it. Every document has my name. Every client knows me as the lead. The partners see me as the architect of this deal. She applied her lipstick carefully before continuing. Not a cent from the merger will be yours. Accept that reality and move on. I left without responding, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and helplessness. In that moment, I made the decision to quit, not just the firm, but possibly the legal profession entirely. The system was rigged, and I was tired of fighting. I returned to my office to begin clearing personal items when my phone rang. It was Robert. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I'm leaving," I replied flatly. Amanda made it crystal clear that this is how the game is played. And I don't want to play anymore. "Before you do anything, have you finished reviewing all the merger documents like I suggested?" "I've gone through most of them." "Nothing helpful." My voice cracked slightly. "It's over, Robert." "Not necessarily." His tone sharpened. "The final contract review is tomorrow with the clients. If there's anything to find it tonight." After we hung up, I sat staring at the stacks of documents on my desk. One last night of searching for a miracle seemed pointless, but I had nothing to lose. I ordered dinner to the office and settled in for a final review this time, focusing on the implementation clauses, the sections detailing how the merger would be executed after signing. At 2:17 in the morning, bleary-eyed and on my 4th cup of coffee, I found it. Nestled in Section 34, paragraph 342.6, was an unusual clause I had overlooked during previous reviews. Post-merger integration shall be executed exclusively under the supervision of original drafting counsel to ensure consistency with pre-merger intent and structural design. I read it again, then a third time. The clause specified that whoever drafted the original merger structure must supervise its implementation. And I had documentation proving I was that person, emails, drafts, revision histories, all with timestamps predating Amanda's involvement. This wasn't just a technicality. It was legally binding language that had been approved by both companies' legal teams. The original drafting counsel was unquestionably me. I pulled up the document history. The clause had been suggested by Crawford's previous general counsel, who had since retired. It appeared to be boilerplate language he included in all major transactions, likely designed to prevent last-minute changes by people unfamiliar with the deal's nuances. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I carefully documented the clause, gathering all evidence of my role as original drafting counsel. I didn't sleep that night, but when morning came, I had assembled an irrefutable case. The final contract review was scheduled for 10 a.m., with representatives from both companies present. I arrived early, calm despite my exhaustion, and took my assigned seat at the far end of the table. Amanda entered with Michael, both looking confident and relaxed. She barely glanced in my direction as she arranged her materials at the head of the table. As the clients arrived, I remained quiet, waiting for the right moment. The meeting proceeded with standard review protocols, page-by-page confirmation of the final merger terms. Amanda led the discussion, positioning herself front and center. When we reached Section 34, I spoke up for the first time. "Before we continue, I believe we should pay special attention to paragraph 342.6, I said clearly. Amanda shot me an irritated glance. "We can address minor implementation details after the signing." "Actually," I continued, "this clause specifically states that post-merger integration must be executed under the supervision of original drafting counsel to ensure consistency with the pre-merger intent." Edward Franklin Crawford's CEO frowned slightly. "Let's see that paragraph." As the room fell silent, the clause was displayed on the main screen. Amanda's expression remained confident, clearly assuming her name was on all relevant documentation. For clarity, I added, I have here the complete document history showing that I was the original drafting counsel for this merger structure beginning 9 months ago. I distributed copies of my carefully prepared evidence, emails, draft histories, and revision logs, all clearly establishing my role as the architect of the merger from its inception. Amanda's smirk faltered as she flipped through the pages. This is a minor technical point. As VP, I naturally have oversight. The language seems quite specific. Interrupted Crawford's new general counsel, reviewing the clause. It creates a legal obligation that the person who drafted the original structure must supervise implementation. Based on these records, that person appears to be Ophelia. Amanda's face flushed. There must be some misunderstanding. I've been leading this merger. The documentation suggests otherwise, the general counsel continued. These timestamps and email records clearly show Ophelia developing the structure months before your substantive involvement, Miss Bailey. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Michael was examining the evidence with growing concern while Amanda's confident demeanor crumbled visibly. Our company takes contractual language very seriously, Edward Franklin stated firmly. If the contract specifies that original drafting counsel must supervise implementation, then that's what will happen. The records indicate that person is Ophelia. For the first time since the ordeal began, I allowed myself a small smile. The legal clause that Amanda had never bothered to read carefully had become my checkmate. After discovering the crucial clause, I needed to verify its enforceability before the final meeting. That evening, I quietly reached out to Professor Eleanor Grant, my former contracts professor who now consulted on complex corporate matters. This clause is absolutely binding, she confirmed after reviewing the language. It's unusual, but legally sound. If you can prove you were the original drafting counsel, they're contractually obligated to have you supervise implementation. Armed with this external validation, I meticulously organized my evidence. I created a timeline, showing my work from the merger's inception, backed by email timestamps, document metadata, and meeting notes. I even recovered early drafts from the firm's document management system, all bearing my digital signature. The morning of the final contract review, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Jessica was already there nursing a coffee in the break room. "You look different today," she observed. Less defeated. I hesitated before confiding in her. I found something in the merger documents. Something Amanda missed. Jessica leaned forward. "What kind of something?" I explained the clause and my documentation. Her eyes widened as she grasped the implications. "This could backfire spectacularly," she warned. "Amanda has powerful allies. Are you prepared for the fallout if this doesn't work?" "I've already drafted my resignation letter," I admitted. "If this fails, I'm leaving anyway. But I have to try." Jessica squeezed my hand. "Then do it right. Be professional, stick to facts, and don't make it personal in the room. This is about contract language, not vengeance." I spent the next hour in my office reviewing potential scenarios and preparing responses for any objections Amanda might raise. I considered what I would do if Michael dismissed my evidence, or if the clients didn't care about the clause. I even prepared for the possibility that Amanda had found and removed the clause in the final version. At 9:45, I gathered my materials and headed to the conference room. My heart pounded as I took my seat at the far end of the table, but my hands were steady. This wasn't just about credit or bonuses anymore. It was about professional integrity. The meeting began as expected. Amanda dominated the discussion, making eye contact with everyone except me. Her confidence was palpable as she guided the clients through the final review process. Occasionally, she would direct questions to other team members, pointedly excluding me from the conversation. The tension in my body built as we approached Section 34. Several times I noticed Robert glancing in my direction with subtle encouragement. When we finally reached paragraph 342.6, I spoke up calmly but firmly. The room fell silent as the clause was displayed and my evidence distributed. Amanda's initial dismissiveness quickly turned to visible panic as she realized the implications. She attempted to recover, suggesting the clause was a technicality that could be waived. "This isn't a mere technicality," Crawford's general counsel countered. "It's a binding contractual obligation specifically designed to ensure implementation consistency." Michael, who had been reviewing my evidence with increasing concern, looked up. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess to discuss this internally." With respect, Edward Franklin interjected, "This clause is part of the agreement both companies have already approved. We're not interested in last-minute changes or reinterpretations." Amanda's face flushed deeper. "As VP overseeing this merger, the documentation clearly indicates that Ophelia developed the original structure and strategy." Lexington's CFO interrupted, tapping my evidence file. "If she's the original drafting counsel referenced in this clause, then contractually she must supervise implementation." Amanda turned to Michael, expecting his intervention, but the managing partner's expression had become carefully neutral as he assessed the shifting dynamics. With both client companies taking my side, his options were limited. "Ophelia has indeed been integrally involved with this merger from the beginning," Michael stated diplomatically. "If the contract specifies her oversight role, we'll certainly honor that." It was a masterful non-commitment that nevertheless acknowledged my position. Amanda's expression hardened as she realized Michael wasn't coming to her rescue. "I suggest we continue with the review," I offered calmly. "We can address the implementation details more fully after completing the contract verification." The clients nodded approvingly at my professional approach, and the meeting resumed with a noticeably different atmosphere. Though Amanda maintained her position at the head of the table, her authority had been visibly diminished. Each time she spoke, the clients now glanced in my direction for confirmation. By meeting's end, what had seemed impossible that morning had become reality. I was officially recognized as the implementation supervisor for the Crawford-Lexington merger, as specified in the contract. The very document Amanda had used to build her reputation would now be the instrument of her accountability. As we gathered our materials after the clients departed, Amanda approached me, her voice low and threatening. "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with." I met her gaze steadily. "Actually, I do. I'm dealing with someone who takes credit for other people's work but doesn't bother reading the fine print. That clause has been there for 9 months, Amanda. Maybe if you'd spent more time reviewing the actual documents instead of planning how to steal credit, you would have found it." Her eyes widened at my unexpected assertiveness. Before she could respond, Michael called her name from across the room, his expression grim. As she walked away, Robert appeared beside me. "Well played," he murmured. "But proceed carefully. Wounded predators are the most dangerous." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," he said with a small smile, "you prepare to fulfill your contractual obligation as implementation supervisor and document everything twice as carefully as before." That afternoon, email notifications began appearing in my inbox. First, a meeting request from Edward Franklin for implementation planning addressed directly to me with Amanda merely copied. Then a system notification that I had been granted higher access permissions in the document management system. Finally, a brief message from Michael requesting a private meeting the following morning. For the first time in months, I left the office at a reasonable hour, stopping to buy a proper dinner instead of surviving on vending machine snacks. As I walked home through the city streets, I felt lighter, taller, as if a physical weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Amanda had attempted to erase me from the merger story. Instead, she had inadvertently written me into its most important chapter. The aftermath of the contract review meeting unfolded rapidly. Michael's assistant called that evening to confirm our meeting had been moved earlier to accommodate your new implementation responsibilities. She explained, her tone noticeably more respectful than before. When I arrived at his office the next morning, Michael was reviewing the documents I had provided. "Sit down, Ophelia," he said, his expression unreadable. "I've been examining these records carefully." I waited silently, maintaining my newfound composure. "These files show a clear pattern," he continued. "You developed the merger structure, months before Amanda became significantly involved. He leaned back in his chair. "Why didn't you bring this to my attention earlier?" "I attempted to schedule meetings with you several times over the past few months," I replied evenly. "Your assistant said you were unavailable." Michael frowned slightly. "That's unfortunate. Nevertheless, we have a situation to address. The clients are insisting that you oversee implementation as specified in the contract." "I'm prepared to fulfill that responsibility," I assured him. "Good. But this raises questions about the overall leadership of this merger that I need to resolve." He steepled his fingers. "I'll be conducting a thorough review of all merger documentation. In the meantime, you'll report directly to me on implementation matters." As I left his office, I spotted Amanda watching from the corridor, her expression thunderous. She turned abruptly and disappeared into her office, slamming the door. Over the next week, the power shift became increasingly apparent. Crawford and Lexington executives began contacting me directly with implementation questions. Junior associates who had previously avoided eye contact now eagerly volunteered for my implementation team. Partners who had never acknowledged me stopped by my office to touch base on the merger progress. Amanda launched a desperate counteroffensive, scheduling competing meetings and attempting to insert herself into implementation discussions. During one video conference with Crawford's transition team, she interrupted repeatedly until Edward Franklin himself muted her microphone and asked her to allow the designated implementation counsel to continue. 10 days after the contract review, Michael called me into a meeting with the firm's executive committee. Amanda was conspicuously absent. "We've completed our review of the Crawford-Lexington merger documentation," Michael announced to the assembled partners. "The findings are concerning. It appears there has been a systematic misrepresentation of work product attribution throughout this process." He distributed a report detailing the evidence I had provided, supplemented by additional documentation the firm had gathered. Original work attributed to Amanda Bailey was in fact created by Ophelia. This pattern extends beyond just strategic development to include financial models, regulatory solutions, and client-facing materials. The partners exchanged troubled glances as Michael continued. "This raises serious questions about professional conduct and firm values. We've decided that effective immediately, Ophelia will assume full leadership of the Crawford-Lexington merger through completion and implementation. Amanda will transition to other responsibilities." After the meeting, Robert congratulated me discreetly. "Michael had no choice," he explained. "The clients made it clear they want you leading implementation, and the evidence of misconduct was too substantial to ignore." Amanda's position became untenable. The official announcement came the following day. An all-staff email from Michael stated that in light of contractual requirements and to ensure consistency with original design principles, Ophelia will lead the Crawford-Lexington merger implementation phase. The carefully worded message made no mention of Amanda, but her removal from the project was implicit. Amanda's reaction was immediate and self-destructive. She sent a scathing email to Michael copied to all partners, accusing me of manipulating documentation and undermining her leadership. Her claims were easily disproven by the time-stamped evidence already in circulation. The following week, Amanda made a fatal miscalculation. During a client call discussing tax implications of the asset transfer, she contradicted my explanation of a complex structure I had designed months earlier. Her alternative interpretation would have exposed Crawford to significant tax liability. "That's not correct," Edward Franklin interjected before I could respond. "Ophelia's original structure specifically addresses this issue through the offshore holding arrangement she designed. It's one of the reasons we selected your firm." The call ended awkwardly. An hour later, Amanda was summoned to Michael's office. She emerged 30 minutes later, white-faced, and began clearing personal items from her office. The firm announcement came the next morning. Amanda Bailey is leaving Winters & Thompson to pursue other opportunities. We thank her for her contributions and wish her success in her future endeavors. The standard departure language fooled no one. The speed of her exit security, escorting her from the building that afternoon, spoke volumes about the circumstances. With Amanda gone, the true extent of her credit theft became apparent. Associates from other teams came forward with similar stories. Documents throughout the firm's system showed patterns of her claiming others' work. Michael established a committee to review attribution practices and implement safeguards against future misconduct. The Crawford-Lexington merger closed successfully 3 weeks later. The implementation phase proceeded smoothly under my leadership, with the integration teams following the roadmap I had developed from the beginning. At the celebration dinner following the closing, Edward Franklin raised his glass. To Ophelia, whose brilliant strategy and attention to detail made this merger possible. We knew from the start who was really doing the work. We're just glad the record has been corrected. The professional recognition was deeply satisfying, but the financial acknowledgement came shortly after. Michael called me to his office to discuss compensation. The firm's merger bonus will be allocated based on actual contribution, not title, he informed me. As the architect and implementation leader, you'll receive the primary portion. The amount he named 7 figures momentarily left me speechless. Additionally, Michael continued, the executive committee has unanimously decided to accelerate your partnership track. We'll be announcing your promotion to junior partner next month. As word spread throughout the firm, my status transformed completely. Partners who had previously ignored me sought my input on their matters. Associates requested to join my teams. Jessica celebrated with me over champagne in my newly assigned corner office, smaller than Amanda's had been, but with the same impressive view of the Manhattan skyline. You did it, she said, clinking her glass against mine. You beat her at her own game. Not her game, I corrected. I won by playing by the actual rules, the ones written in black and white, that she was too arrogant to read. The final vindication came a month later, when the American Lawyer published a feature on the Crawford-Lexington merger, highlighting the innovative legal structure that had overcome significant regulatory hurdles. The article prominently quoted Edward Franklin, praising Ophelia's groundbreaking approach, and featured my portrait alongside the firm's managing partners. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Amanda. She had joined a competing firm, but was struggling to rebuild her reputation. You think you've won, she wrote, but this business is about relationships and influence. The methods you use to undermine me won't be forgotten. I considered various responses, but ultimately settled on simplicity. I didn't undermine you, Amanda. Paragraph 342.6 did. Perhaps in your new position you'll take the time to read the fine print. Hoodle, I never received a reply. In the year following the Crawford-Lexington merger, my professional life transformed in ways I could never have anticipated when this journey began. The path from being a marginalized associate to becoming the youngest junior partner at Winters & Thompson taught me lessons that extended far beyond contract clauses and corporate politics. The first months after Amanda's departure were challenging in unexpected ways. Suddenly thrust into a leadership position, I had to quickly develop skills I'd had no opportunity to cultivate before. Leading client meetings, managing teams, and making executive decisions all required growth that sometimes felt uncomfortable. Robert proved invaluable during this transition. Being right isn't the same as being effective. He counseled when I struggled with a particularly difficult client. You won the battle for recognition. Now learn to wield your authority with wisdom. My relationship with Michael evolved from distant respect to genuine mentorship. During our weekly meetings, he often reflected on how Amanda had deceived him. I missed the signs, he admitted once. Her confidence was so compelling that I never questioned the disconnect between her presentations and her understanding of the details. It's a mistake I won't repeat. Under his guidance, I implemented a new documentation system for the firm that ensured proper attribution of work product. Each substantive document now included a revision history that clearly identified the original author and subsequent contributors. What began as a safeguard against credit theft became recognized as an industry best practice, eventually adopted by several peer firms. Jessica and I grew closer, our shared experience creating a bond that extended beyond work. When she faced challenges with a difficult acquisition months later, I supported her as she had supported me. "Documentation saved you," she reminded me over lunch one day. "But it was your courage to speak up at exactly the right moment that made the difference." The Crawford-Lexington implementation proceeded, successfully generating even larger fees for the firm than initially projected. My bonus reflected this success, allowing me to finally pay off my student loans and purchase a modest apartment in Brooklyn. I sent my parents on their dream vacation to Italy, a small repayment for their decades of sacrifice for my education. As my professional reputation grew, I began receiving invitations to speak at industry conferences and contribute to legal publications. My article on contractual safeguards in complex mergers was published in the Harvard Business Review, establishing me as a thought leader in the field. Edward Franklin became a valuable client contact, referring additional business to our firm and specifically requesting me as lead counsel on subsequent matters. "I value people who do the work and know the details," he told me during a client dinner. "Ophelia, you're the real deal." 6 months after Amanda's departure, I received a LinkedIn message from Diana, the attorney Jessica had mentioned, who left the firm after a similar experience. She was now general counsel at a tech startup and wanted to reconnect. Over coffee, she shared her story, painfully similar to mine, except without the vindication of a hidden contract clause. "I often wonder how things might have been different if I'd fought harder," she admitted. "You made the right choice for you," I assured her. "Sometimes leaving is the best option." I was prepared to do the same. "The difference," she observed, "is that you found a way to fight on your own terms. That's rare." Her comment made me reflect on the broader implications of my experience. In the months that followed, I quietly established a mentorship program for junior female attorneys at the firm, creating a safe space to discuss challenges and strategies for advancement. Without explicitly referencing what had happened with Amanda, I emphasized the importance of documentation, strategic advocacy, and knowing when and how to stand your ground. The program expanded rapidly, eventually gaining official firm sponsorship and dedicated resources. Several senior female partners joined as mentors, sharing their own experiences, navigating the complex terrain of corporate law. Occasionally, I would hear updates about Amanda through industry gossip. She struggled to establish herself at her new firm, her reputation tarnished by how she'd left Winters and Thompson. Without access to others' work to claim as her own, her performance reportedly failed to meet expectations. After 18 months, she left private practice entirely for an in-house position with significantly less prestige and compensation. I took no pleasure in her downfall. The experience had taught me that karma in professional settings isn't about cosmic justice, it's about the natural consequences of how we conduct ourselves. Amanda's approach was fundamentally unsustainable because it wasn't built on genuine ability or integrity. As I settled into my new role, I developed a leadership philosophy centered on 3 principles I'd learned through hardship documentation, recognition, and advocacy. Documentation became my foundation not just for legal protection, but as a discipline that ensured clarity and accountability in all professional interactions. Recognition of others' contributions became my practice. I made it a point to publicly acknowledge team members' work, ensuring that credit flowed freely to those who earned it. Advocacy, both for myself and others, became my purpose. When I observed junior colleagues being marginalized or overlooked, I spoke up using my hard-earned authority to create space for their voices. One evening, as I mentored a promising first-year associate facing challenges similar to those I had experienced, she asked me a penetrating question. "Do you regret not standing up to Amanda sooner?" I considered this carefully before answering. "I regret doubting myself," I finally replied. I knew I was being wronged, but I questioned whether I had the right to challenge it. That's the real lesson. Trust your instincts about what's right, and find the appropriate way to address it. Looking back, I realized that finding paragraph 342.6 wasn't simply luck. It was the result of thoroughness, attention to detail, and an unwillingness to give up despite overwhelming odds. The clause gave me leverage, but my preparation allowed me to use it effectively. The experience transformed not just my career trajectory, but my understanding of professional relationships. I learned that true success isn't measured by titles or compensation, but by the integrity with which we conduct ourselves and the impact we have on others. Today, as I mentor the next generation of attorneys navigating their own complex professional landscapes, I emphasize that the most powerful clause in any contract is the one that affirms our value and our voice. Sometimes we discover that clause hidden in the fine print of a merger agreement. More often, we must write it ourselves through our actions, our courage, and our unwavering commitment to what's right. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a professional setting? What strategies helped you navigate challenging workplace dynamics? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to advocate for themselves. Remember, sometimes the most important clause is the one that reminds us of our worth. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And I wish you the courage to find your own paragraph 342.6 when you need it most.